Welcome to another Zen Rose Garden Pro Tip Series.
Bum, bum.
Coming up in this video, third eye, the real thing. Yeah, so what is the real third eye? Can you actually grow your third eye for real? In this video, we get nerdy with neuroscience.
Get your pencils out.
So this is part of our third eye playlist, how to grow your third eye.
And if you watch the whole playlist, we'll show you some new science that will blow your third eye blind.
You can find the full playlist link down below. Boom. And for those of you who are just getting to know us,
I'm Heather.
And I'm David
From ZenRoseGarden.com. So this is the fourth and meatiest video for this series on how to grow the third eye. This is going to be a big one, guys. So get your pencils out. So this whole week, we're talking about different parts of the brain that activate during the classic mystic experience or the intuitive, empathic, or psychic experience.
Right. So the real question that we have is, can you really grow your third eye? We're talking about legit grow your third eye. And what is the new science about the real third eye that we've been talking about?
So now that we have totally flipped the pancake over, we want to know from you, what experiences have you had with your third eye? Because they can be all over the map. There's so many different ways to experience the mystic experience.
Yes.
What was your number one? We're going to look at the brain.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to look at it from a purely left brain, right brain function, logical mind, right, operates from the left hemispheres, and creative, intuitive brain activities come from the right hemispheres. Areas of the brain have different functions, left and right, and it can get pretty complex.
But today, we're talking about parts of the brain as they relate to third eye functions.
So the brain parts themselves, not necessarily half and half.
Right.
So a lot of the research we're going to talk about today was discovered and began to be published in Neuroscience, which I follow.
Right.
In the which we follow. Yeah. Every morning I'm on. I get my neuroscience articles and my Scientific America articles because I like to read other stuff. So in the 1990s is some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today came out. So a lot of discoveries are still being made and are ever evolving. And some of this is actually from like some stuff that was published in 2006. So it's pretty recent, right?
But it is happening fast.
And ever evolving. So as we follow the science, we begin to see a couple of things. One is that the intuition of the mystics of the past, thousands of years of mystics who are tapping in with their abilities, have equated locations of certain chakras, such as the third eye and the crown chakra, as being relative to where brain scans show activity now related to those actions.
And number two, that it is time to update our thinking as mystics and see where we might be holding ourselves back with old thought processes that are slowing down our progress, and expand more into growing our third eye with practices that are not as hard as we once thought.
Blazing Turtle, sometimes when people are telling me something personal, I will see flashes of images or a flash of an emotion. Is that what you're talking about? Wait, because we're going to touch on that in a few minutes.
Right. It's time. Now it's time for the good stuff. Now it's time for the good stuff. So here we go.
Giving him his moment.
Many moments today.
Let's get into the tip number one. Okay. First, we're going to talk about the frontal lobe and the anterior cingulate cortex.
We'll just call it right here.
ACC.
Right. So the largest part of the brain is the frontal lobe, where logic and rational thinking live, right? We talked about this in the last video. When we are in hyperlogic, those third eye impulses can be dismissed because they seem illogical.
But it's really because they seem scary, right? So the fear center immediately wakes up and then all logic goes out the window. So we know that
it didn't even subscribe. That's lame.
We know that the brain is interconnected, right? All the cells talk to each other. So it's very difficult to get them to go in different corners. So this is an example of the brain at war with itself somewhere.
Can't they all just get along?
But we like the frontal lobe, right? The frontal lobe, we need the frontal lobe. It imagines, it creates, and it integrates all our ideas about the mystical experience, positive or negative, and then it logically evaluates them.
And puts them where they're supposed to go, right?
So we really need this part.
Or at least where it believes they're supposed to go. The part of the brain we consider the real third eye, or more probably the most central part of a bigger system, sits between the frontal lobe and the limbic system. It looks like this funny little collared shape part of the brain and is called dun dun dun
The anterior cingulate cortex. So it's this funny little collar-shaped thing that sits right behind the frontal lobe and in front of the limbic system. So it sits between these two systems. And this is really important. It sits in the place of the traditionally visualized third eye.
Ooh, some of its functions are empathy, compassion, social awareness, and intuition.
But it is really complex and really cool. And
it's like so cool. It's like winning at life.
Oh, Jesus. This is where more evolved parts of third eye experiences seem to take place. Okay. This part of the brain allows you to experience the mystical in a loving and compassionate way. This is the more evolved part of your brain.
Yes. It decreases superstitious or religious anxiety, guilt, fear, and anger by suppressing activity in the amygdala.
Which, if you remember,
CTFO, chill the fuck out.
Which, if you remember, the amygdala is in the limbic system. So when people see auras, lights, or visuals that are connected to that, the visual third eye experience, this area of the brain, bring, it lights up.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's actually pretty cool. So how do your emotional limbic system, which is the primal old part of your brain, your logical frontal lobe, and your anterior cingulate work together?
Let's find out.
This is how they work together.
So think of it like a seesaw.
So the anterior cingulate cortex is a fulcrum, basically. It's a fulcrum, which is a seesaw
in the middle
that controls and balances the activity of the frontal lobe, which is your ability to use logic and reason, and the emotional limbic system, which includes the fear-producing amygdala.
So the ACC is busy doing a lot of things, but balancing primal emotions, right, with logical thoughts that flow between the old world and the new world is one big job.
So it's a conversation that never sleeps.
It's also the best mediator ever.
So on top of it doing these things we consider third eye functions, it's doing all this other stuff. But when you lose control of emotions, blood flow suddenly increases to the limbic system, and boom, you are now fearful, hyper alert.
Shook the camera. That was pretty cool.
That was great, David. We have no Foley artist. We have David. So, and boom, you are now fearful, hyper alert, and defensive.
When activity goes up in the limbic, it goes down in the frontal lobe, right?
So seesaw.
Fulcrum, seesaw.
So basically you stop being logical or reasonable, and your cognitive skills,
including your psychic mediumship aptitude,
which lives there, go down the pooper.
Not pretty.
Okay, then the amygdala becomes active. The anterior cingulate shuts down, where all that third eye activity has been observed.
Now your reptilian brain is back to running the show, amok, all over everywhere, going, where's the threat? Where's the threat? Is it a squirrel? Is it going to eat me?
So because the anterior cingulate is now shut down, your empathy and your intuition decline, and you lose the ability to accurately assess how other people feel. You just think you know how you feel because the emotions and feelings of the limbic system are
making it so real. Like red alert. So you are getting all of the primal feels of the limbic, but there is a higher probability that the information is distorted because you are disconnected from that anterior cingulate cortex, which processes the more evolved mystic information.
Well, and the ACC is where you have the feelings.
You down with ACC?
Of compassion and empathy. So the true empathy and compassion are in that part of the brain.
Right.
And back here is that like overactive emotions and feelings. So that's not true empathy.
Right.
That's an overactive limbic system.
But when your frontal lobe becomes active, stays active, and just kind of gets turned on, you stimulate the anterior cingulate cortex, which slows down the amygdala. It's like, all right, dude, chill. We're all good. It's like the hippie of the bunch. One side goes up, the other side goes down.
So you might be seeing how this might be affecting your own personal psychic practice, because we go into fear sometimes, and that's when we're kind of like, how come I can't tap in? I've lost that link or that connection. It's because this emotional part is overstimulated. It shuts it down,
and then nobody's listening to anybody, and fear wins. Right.
Let's move on to
tip 2.
Numero dos.
Tip 2, the limbic system and the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC. Yeah, so, you know me. Oh,
It's not going to stop.
It's
so
not.
we know that from the last few videos we talked about in this series, the oldest part of the brain that ruled our existence for 150 million years is the limbic system, where the amygdala sits, that it's in control of fight or flight, which don't get me wrong now, we really, really, really need.
That's where all of our primal sexual urges come from, right?
So
yay, sex.
Sex might get really boring without it. So we need that primitive part of our brain for a lot of things.
Right.
It's not just to tell us we're afraid or not afraid. So the frontal lobe, which takes up something like a third of the overall brain at this point in our evolution, it's taken over, right? It's the newer part of the brain, and it evolved to its current state only about 100 to 200,000 years ago.
Cute little baby.
So you got
old
grandpa.
Big baby if it takes up a third of it.
Yeah, but babies get fat. So you got old grandpa back here.
My brain's got baby fat.
He can get super crabby, and you got little baby up here trying to like.
Boom. That is probably the best way to describe these two parts of the brain.
And you've got Yoda in the middle trying to hold them both down. Yoda's in the middle, like with, okay, basically here's what's going on.
Light side, dark side.
I'm going to give you an instant metaphor. The anterior cingulate cortex is the Yoda of your brain. The frontal part of your brain, the frontal lobe parts of the baby, is like Luke Skywalker when he first got on the Millennial Falcon.
There you go.
And the thing at the back is like the old ass crinkled up emperor that's like, okay, that's basically what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. So
the amygdala, when overly...
let's talk about the limbic system first.
Okay.
So among other parts of the limbic system as a whole, because there's a lot of different parts, like the hippocampus and all that other, but the parts we're going to talk about today are two. So the limbic system includes the amygdala and the thalamus, and we're going to talk about these two right now. Now you can talk about the amygdala.
All right. So the amygdala, which is different than Princess Amandala, or whatever the heck her name was, when overly stimulated, creates an emotional response of fear in reaction to the mystic experience, right?
Where the thalamus, which is still part of the limbic system, gives you emotional meaning to the mystic experience that we need, and seems to be the key organ in the brain, it's part of the brain, that makes any mystic experience feel objectively and neurologically real. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. But if you have been fed a steady, dysfunctional diet of religious fears, you may have a subconscious fear of maybe a punishing God, or that the evil forces are out to get you, or that the negative energy of others is going to overtake you and seep into your souls and make you a bad person for whatever reason.
You see the problem here? So you're kind of beginning to see how the brain works when it comes to our own personal fears of things we don't, that shock us. So we overstimulate the amygdala by dwelling on those feelings.
Right. It's not whether or not you experience these, it's the dwelling. So this suppresses the frontal lobe's ability to logically think about the mystic experience that we're having. And that's really unfortunate, because we really do need the logic to make sense of the mystic and for it to become actually useful in our lives. Dude says something I tell my peeps all the time, CTFO probably, slow breathing to move back to chill mode. Absolutely. Yes. Hashtag brain fat. Love brain fat. It is so tasty and delicious.
So, wow, really? Did you just say that?
I did.
You brain fat.
I love.
Now they think you're a cannibal.
Oh, wow. Also, I want to say what is up to Sonia. It says frontal lobe out the window, completely out the fucking window at 5 o'clock traffic, moving forward.
So, bonus. I want to give you a little bonus.
Now it's time for the bonus tip.
This is not actually the bonus tip. This is a bonus thought on my part. So the parietal lobe, like I said, the third eye is all over the place in your brain, but there's this one function that tends to be the more evolved part. So the parietal lobes, which are over here, do play a big part in your third eye experience, but this is the part of the brain that identifies the mystic experience and the mystic presence as both something that exists externally to us and something that you are at one with in a peaceful way. So in those deep states of meditation, it creates a oneness. We're going to talk about more in video 6 when we talk about the crown chakra and the third eye connection.
Absolutely. So you know that experience when you feel like you are at one with everything and individual, that would be this part right here that we're going to talk about in video 6. Wild magic with the dude. It's been a while since my anatomy class, but is this the eye of Horus?
Why can't I? The Uraeus? Is it like similar to that? Because that would be sort of indicative of the crown chakra. But it depends on what the Egyptians were visualizing.
All right.
I'd like more information on that.
Yeah.
Because that's very interesting to me. That sparked my thing. A lot of the ancient mystics were, as they tapped into this energy, were sensing these energy centers. And now we're kind of seeing them in brain scans as they light up. And they're really lining up with what the ancients saw.
Right.
Right. And if you look in like old pictures of paintings that, you know, with the halos, I mean, that's the crown chakra, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my halo is kind of tilted, but that's me.
You are kind of tilted.
My fulcrum's off.
So how are we doing so far? I hope this is all making sense. Is this making sense? So a quick flash.
Side note.
You know how I like side notes. In 1990.
Way back
in 1990, not that long ago, I told you a lot of this is new research. A neuron was discovered that we're going to talk about in the next series that may explain one of the reasons some empaths become overreactive to the emotions of other people. I'm not talking about all empaths. I'm talking about when that empath flips into that limbic system reaction.
And just a heads up, in our next series, we're going to be talking more about that.
But one research study that sprung out of that discovery of that neuron was in 2015, right? Just a couple of years ago, where researchers identified neurons in the anterior cingulate cortex that we've been talking about that can selectively predict unknown decisions and the hidden states of mind of another person.
So these other predictive neurons,
which is kind of what they were calling them, other predictive, like predicting the other person.
They are uniquely sensitive when the observer is visually in someone's presence.
Right. So they tend to stimulate and turn on in the ACC, which is short for anterior cingulate cortex, if you haven't figured it out.
You down with ACC?
When the observer is visually seeing another person.
Right.
One of those neurons start to fire, and they can
stronger.
They can tap into what someone is thinking or their hidden whatever it is, and we all know what that is, right?
So more research is currently happening. More
research
in regards to non-social cognitive knowing. So this is how people know things when they are not in a visual social context, and these are still being explored.
Right, and so this is real recent research. So they actually have discovered there is a neuron in the brain that when you visually see someone, and this can be on the video or in a social context, that those things start to fire and start to understand someone else's intentions or their decisions or their hidden states of mind. So they're beginning to say what we've said for a long time, this stuff is a function of your mind. You just have to get all of these parts to cooperate with each other.
Yeah. And Wild Magic with the Dude says, I have Horus, the shape from the side of what the inner brain looks like.
Okay.
I'll look it up and send it later.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, please do.
Seeing the little, the like art eyes of Horus, but like, I would love to see like their drawing. So the Egyptians really were looking at as much science as they knew at the time, which was actually quite a bit, into like equating the science and the mysticism. So the Egyptians, I am not surprised, would have kind of equated this thing together.
So moving on to tip number 3, how to grow your third eye.
So what is your third eye really, right?
You might say that it is your whole brain.
So different parts of the brain play different functions in processing mystical information.
Some are primitive, some are more evolved.
But the ACC seems to be the real center, and that is the part you want to focus on growing.
Right. So you strengthen the physical parts of the brain that are connected to the third eye functions with meditation and spiritual practice, because it physically strengthens the frontal lobe and the ACC. You know me? The ACC. You know me? All right.
So they are babies in the evolutionary scale of things, remember? So if you stimulate and grow neural connections in the ACC, they do grow like a forest, and those in turn feeds its close neighbor. This is another important part of mind, the striatum. Striatum. And this is an important part of the brain because it inhibits the fight or flight, fear-based, superstitious amygdala.
Not Princess Amidala.
And that allows you to feel safe in the presence of anything mystical, from ghosts to God to goblins.
So don't be scared of ghosts, gods, or goblins.
And so what are some things that you can do?
Brain work.
Okay.
Brain work, that's all it takes, right? So you can set aside 12 to 20 minutes a day to contemplate the mystical and center yourself by doing breath work. And I love that the dude was talking about just breathe and get yourself back to center. Yeah, doing different types of breath work like pranayama, for example, which is a yogic type of breathing, meditation, or any non-superstition based spiritual practice. And work on your fears. Duh.
So let me give you kind of a rundown here. So neuroscience has done a lot of study on religion in the brain and God in the brain and that kind of stuff. And I love Andrew Newberg's work on this topic. It's really fascinating. So what they did find was that religion doesn't necessarily hurt your brain, because a lot of New Age people around, no, like religion. It's when you put superstition and authority and you, me versus them into your religion and fears and all the demons and devils and all that, that actually hurts your brain. It's been shown to actually kind of shrink it.
It's not the religion itself.
It's not the religion itself. It's how you use the religion.
Boom.
So when you've got all these old kind of amygdala-based fears of these things, it actually starts to release chemicals that hurt your brain and also makes you kind of an asshole.
And so dumbs you down, literally.
Right. So that's why we say do any kind of non-superstitious spiritual practice.
Even if it's religious, as long as you don't bring fear to it or an us versus them mentality.
Right.
So look in your life where your spiritual practice includes any kind of superstitious belief that you may have recreated from some old fear-based religious belief.
And this is what we see people doing when they make that transition from like their traditional religion that they're leaving into spiritual work, is sometimes they recreate a kind of superstition that comes from that old amygdala-based authoritarian God of like thousands of years ago when we were super primitive and fighting each other with sticks. And they bring it into some kind of modern spiritual peaceful thing. And it kind of creates this undercurrent that feeds an overactive limbic system, especially if you are already an overly reactive empathic person.
Right. And like Heather was talking about, there can be resistance because of that old primal amygdala, whose old authoritarian ways die hard. They really don't want to go.
Remember, it's Emperor Seducious or whoever he is. He's like back there.
Emperor No Groove.
What's his emperor? Some Star Wars nerd help me here. That he's like, he doesn't want to die, right? The dude doesn't want to die. He's just like,
I just know him as the Emperor.
He's got
a name, but nobody knows his name because he's a jackass.
Douchebag. I don't know. But anyway, this
Emperor Sid Vicious.
Seditious?
Lord Sidious.
Palpatine. Lord Sidious. I've got to, thank God for nerds.
Lord Sidious, Emperor Palpatine.
Yes, both of those. Those are your amygdala right there. They're like the amygdala twins. So this is why we always say work on your fears, because very often those fears sneak over with us because that amygdala does not want to let go. It's been ruling your head for 150 million years.
Even though we're trying to get woke and be woke and we bring over the old shit, you can't evolve.
So here's my kind of advice around that before I tell you a really funny story that is kind of connected to I think it's really funny.
I think Heather story time.
Is that they have shown that your meditation practice, your contemplation practice does not have to be as difficult as most people are making it. You don't have to sit there and like, I've got to do this for it. It can be as simple as you set aside a time to contemplate the mystical, to do some breath work, to, smile, even to focus on, what do you think it is? To even this can be considered part of it, because what they're showing is that these little dendrites in your brain just start growing like crazy. They're hungry for that brain food and that intellectual stimulation that ponders the mystical.
So basically hang out with us every day and you're going to grow your brain.
There you go. So right now you've done 2 sessions of meditation practice just by hanging out with us.
To literally grow your brain.
To literally grow your brain. So this is how you feed your frontal lobe and your ACC.
You know me.
You intellectually stimulate it. You breathe, you do your breath work, you do your yoga, you do all of those things for yourself that takes you out of the conscious mind. And it's not that hard to do. So I think a lot of our clients we see over the years try to make it super, super hard. Like, I can't meditate, it's so hard. That's not the point.
I think what they're doing there is they're basically putting a buffer between what they want to achieve and what they're actually doing.
And guess what you think that might be? Resistance from the old school. I can't do it. It's too hard. I did it. It's the way we always did it. So you got 150 million years versus 200,000 years. So that is why you show up every day to keep growing that part of your brain.
Literally.
But have more fun with it than you're having with it, because most of y'all are not having fun with it. So have fun with it.
Stick with us and we'll grow on you.
So I will tell you a funny story of resistance.
Before you get into the funny story, before we get into Heather's story time, let's see. Casey said, or Helene says, you guys are awesome brain food. Awesome, with a little brain emoji. I love that one. And then Cheryl says, at Marathon, dope shit, right? Yes, absolutely. I love that you say dope shit, because I've said dope shit forever, and that's my life, is dope shit. All right, now it's Heather's story time.
Okay, so we look at all of our comments on our YouTube, and we try to respond to just as many as we can. But there was a funny comment on an old Bedhead Diaries video that we did about—
It was like 2 years ago.
Yeah, like 2 years ago. And it was a video about the goddess cultures and how those arose, and like the progression of how we've seen God through time. And it was purely a theological exploration, right? There was nothing super crazy weird about it. And so somebody got on there and made a comment. And this is exactly, and I laughed because I was like, this is exactly what I'm talking about, how those old fears don't want to die, and how they just, a totally logical, spiritual, whatever person might just like all of a sudden flip into that amygdala. This was the perfect thing. The comment said, these guys are Satan worshipers.
Real thing.
These guys are Satan worshipers. Don't listen to them. They have a really bad energy. And I'm like,
and then they immediately took it down.
I was dying.
I was like, I can't even give you a hug right now, because
here's the thing.
Your comment went away.
Usually when people are assholes, you don't get very much time in my living room. People forget that when you're on YouTube, this is my living room, and you guys are at my house. So
and you are invited to stay as long as you're not a douche.
As long as you don't poop on my carpet, because you know, once in a while you do get a snarky comment like that, but for like super religious people. So, but what's happening is you're seeing that old God not wanting to die, the old authoritarian amygdala just coming out and pooping on the carpet. So I thought it was great. But that's what I mean. So sometimes that was a very dramatic example. But sometimes that happens within our own brain. Those old parts just kind of like come into our forefront and hijack our brain process when we're trying to do any kind of spiritual work, psychic work, intuitive work.
While there are psychic practices that work on specific skills, like what we work on with our students, you have to start with getting the brain healthy, right? Finding ways to slow down that conscious mind on a regular basis.
And contemplate the nature of the universe. It's not that hard, man. You don't even need
as well as staying intellectually and creatively stimulated.
And really, you may not think that those things are directly related to your ability to have your psychic gifts open or your
and be amazingly cool
gifts open, but science is telling us otherwise. Because science is telling us that those dendrites grow like crazy and those neural pathways connect like crazy when you just do these things.
And if you want to be in the psychic Olympics, you've definitely got to train.
Right. So eliminating
also
eliminating those places where you have old superstitions lurking. And how do you figure that out? When you have a fear response. So if you have a fear response to something mystic or somebody's emotions, take a step back and look at that fear response and figure out where it's coming from.
And exercise hope, gratitude, and optimism. These are some of the fastest ways to bring your brain back into a healthy balance.
So a lot of
in other words, if you've got superstition, there's still hope for you.
You know, the number one thing that several neuroscientists have said that help your brain stay healthy are hope, gratitude, and optimism.
Boom.
And getting rid of negative thoughts, and not that spiritual bypassing negative thoughts shit. Like I'm fine. It's all happy, love and light. No, the looking on the fears, evaluating the fears, getting rid of the fears, and then getting to true hope and gratitude and optimism. And that grows your brain more than anything. And
in the positive.
And the science shows it now.
So, and Danson says, thank you for all of these videos. They really help me stay grounded and focused.
Yes.
Awesome. So we want to know, are you more excited now that you have these tips?
You know how we like to do. Have we cleared up some mysteries or busted some spiritual myths?
Busted.
Busted.
No?
Ding.
Okay.
I was thinking of the other 80s song, Bust a Move.
That's exactly
Is that
where I
what
was.
you were singing?
Yeah, the beginning part of that is busted. We have learned that self-growth and developing your superpowers go together like sushi, Sapporo, and sake.
And that's why we did create our signature subscription membership and community Zen Ed Academy. Are you tired of mediumship advice that is way too complicated?
Are you tired of, ready for it? Play along at home, people telling you that the intuitive arts are satanic. Play along at home.
That's so fun
I love it.
to
I love
me.
it. Come on. Are you ready for
Intuitive development without judgment?
Are you ready for psychic and mediumship training that will not scare the crap out of you? If so, Zen Ed Academy is the rebel base. Rebel base. Gotta love the rebel base, where the revolution begins.
Yes. So Zen Ed Academy is where the science of self-growth meets the magic of mysticism. Real information without all the unicorn poop. Zen Ed Academy is our inner circle where we jack you into the ZRG mainframe so you can finally conquer your inner super villain.
Master your unique superpowers.
So that you can heal the world in the special way only you can. And as we found out today, your inner super villain is, guess what? The amygdala. We will be back to chop it up with our hashtag YouTube fam faster than 2 shakes of a unicorn's tail after he's pooped rainbow frosting on your carpet. I realize we talk about pooping a lot on here, don't we?
Yeah, because I'm 13.
When I'm around him, I turn into a 14-year-old boy.
So
that's bad, isn't it?
please don't. Check out the link below for Zen Ed Academy. So what do you need to do to get into the Academy and become part of the revolution? Click the link in the description. Right down there. If you like this video, hit that like button 5 times. Just kidding, once will be plenty.
Oh my God.
And for more live hangouts, behind the scenes secrets, and mind hacking pro tips,
Be sure to subscribe.
and click the bell to turn notifications on
So you're the first to know.
when we drop a new video.
Or go live.
Drop a new video.
Or go live.
And we know that time is a valuable and precious resource, and the fact that you guys have chosen to spend that with us, we honor and appreciate that. But most importantly, that you are here to grow your brain, to become even better in your life and your business, and taking all of that to a completely new level. We honor and appreciate that even more. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next video over here or over here.
We'll see you in the next video.